I know from your book, The Path of the Blue Raven, which I thoroughly enjoyed, that you've had, I think it would be fair to say, some challenges in your life. It hasn't always been magic in that sense, maybe. No. Tell us about some of these, and tell us, where these have sort of led you, whether in terms of synchronicity or, in terms of your learnings, if there have been learnings.
There's been a lot of brokenness, and what I'm cautious of for myself really is very easy to keep going over the past and almost keep it alive in a negative way. Right. So what I'm trying to, and I hope I don't do that now, but what I try to do is look back at my own failures and successes and learn from them, but leave them there, rather than keep bringing them up, which I used to have a tendency to do. I played the victim a bit in the past. Hope I don't anymore. But positively, one of the best ways to experience real magic and magic of ourselves, our own inner beauty, our own inner gold, is actually to look at through our cracks, through our brokenness that are happening now. What I've discovered is that I find nobody asks to go through painful experience. Nobody, and I would never want to give the impression that people need to go through pain or woundedness or brokenness in order to find themselves or to find God or whatever. But let's face it, life is light and dark, and we all do come across things that we'd rather not happen. Sometimes we seem to call them into being, and I've done that myself through bad choices, and sometimes they just happen to us. But what I've discovered the most important truth I think I've learned in my entire life is to, rather than when something bad happens, rather than to blame people out there, or to look at ourselves with guilt, or to regret, or anything like that, actually, or even to try and fix it, to stay with the experience and begin to see what it might be teaching us, how it might be opening us to the deeper parts of ourselves. I think that people on the religious path can be very easily led in a wrong direction, and I'm not saying that in any way to criticize religion, but
do you mean those who are leading religion, or those who are participating?
Both,
or both.
Both, to be quite frank. I can only speak from the point of view of being a Christian priest, and I still am, and I still value the Christian tradition. Yeah. But it can often sound as if it's all about success and achievement, all about climbing up a ladder. There was a term once used by a mystic, actually, which I'm sure has been wrongly interpreted or translated, the ladder of perfection. Actually, in my experience, it's not climbing any ladder of perfection, it's falling from it that we find ourselves, because God isn't at the top of some ladder. And the Christian tradition, and probably most other religions, are not to do with gods who live up there, gods or goddesses who live up there. They're down here, if there is an up and down. I mean, that's a metaphor anyway. But certainly the Christian story is all about a God image that is actually fully human for a start. Not only fully human, but living in a very poor environment, probably an uneducated person, living a messy life, born in a mess, certainly died in one hell of a mess, had messy followers, seemed, in the world's eyes, to be pretty much a failure. Well, to me, we've twisted that into a story of judgment, of a God up there who's judging us, of a humankind down here who somehow aren't good enough, and this kind of blood sacrificial Jesus in between. Instead of seeing it as an archetype of us, Jesus' life is a picture of all of our lives. And it's in that woundedness, in that brokenness, where we find ourselves. So the minute we start to think we're down here and we need to change ourselves, whatever way that involves, whether it's reading the Bible every day, praying this, doing that, going to church every Sunday, whatever we think we need to do in order to find God, ironically, will probably take us further away from God or from ourselves. in my experience, when we fall from that ladder, which is getting to the end of our resources, when we come to the point of powerlessness, when we come to the point of emptiness, the Buddhists would call it emptiness, Alcoholics Anonymous would call it powerlessness, Carmelites would call it nada, nothingness. When we get to that point where we've come to the end of our resources, that is ironically when we're closest to our own fullness. And I think that's true, I really do, in my experience anyway. Maybe not the same for everybody, but I get excited by that because it means we don't have to fear failure. It means we don't have to fear taking risks or going down, roads that maybe take us away from ourselves for a while. We don't have to fear getting it wrong. And yet the culture that we live in is all about, at the moment, getting it right, being successful, doing this in order to achieve that. I think it's twisted, to be honest. That's a long answer, and I've probably not really answered your question anyway.
Sounds good to me.
I tend to do
I wanted
that.
to ask, can I ask you though, just quickly, I mean, who or what is God for you?
I knew you were going to ask that. What is God? I mean, God is a term, a metaphor, because all God talk is metaphorical, for the ground of our being, for the essence of who we are and the essence of what everything is.
So it's about us, it's not about some...
I think it's both. It's transcendent
being,
and it's
both,
immanent.
okay, yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of religious people, Christian priests included, who have dispensed with the notion of a being called God. There are plenty, non-realists, and very wise and enlightened people. I don't think I am one, because I still have this gut feeling that there is an intelligence, there's a cosmic force, there's a loving force, which most religions seem to point to. They'll call it by different names, which is kind of out there, but is also in here. So I'm probably panentheistic. So there's a God who is a loving force, God or goddess, I don't mind what language we call it, which is also as close as our breath, lives within us and among us and between us. Now, I don't think you can define it in a clearer way than that. I mean, there have been libraries of books trying to define God and some of the doctrines that we find in the Christian religion. But I don't see how we can, because in the end it's a mystery.
Can I ask you, in that event, what real value do you think the concept of God has now in the 21st century?
Well, it clearly has a value, because most people, I think, the world over still have some sense of there being a divine force. What God is one way of...
Outside of them?
Yeah. So it has a value. God has become for many people a toxic term, because it conjures up ideas of a punitive male up there sort of being, which is usually disapproving and loves us, but only...
And vengeful. And punishing and...
Yeah. So
looking for sins.
in a sense, it's a blessing and a curse, isn't it, this God language? I mean, we've tried to address that in various ways, in various religions. In the Christian religion, we've tried to address that by certainly not specifically attaching a male connotation to God. Yeah. In other groups of people, I mean, I spend a lot of time with people who call themselves pagan, and they deliberately would say God and goddess, or even just goddess, because the male God language has become so toxic. But I don't think we should necessarily dispense with the term. It's just like priest. I was told on the internet recently, a Facebook discussion, why don't we just get rid of the term priest? It's so negative. Well, I don't think we necessarily need to do that. We just need to look at it differently. To me, everybody is a priest. And actually, we've just been walking around this beautiful, the gardens of this amazing mansion. And you took me and showed me some special trees. To me, trees are priests. Anything that communicates deity to us is a priesthood. So mothers can be priests to their children. Children can be priests to their grandparents. The idea of being an ordained priest is simply focusing on one individual to tell the whole world what we all are. To me, now to some that's heresy, but I don't really care about heresy. No, I don't.
So
Because
one man's heresy is another man's
yeah,
whatever the opposite.
I mean, let's face it. You know, the primary God image for Christians is Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ for Christians is the primary God image, I don't think he would have been too bothered about being labelled a heretic. Now, the term wouldn't have been used anyway, but he was certainly called blasphemer. He was certainly seen as a threat to the establishment. He was fully 110% Jewish, so there's no, Jesus wasn't a Christian. You know, he was a Jewish man who lived and died an Orthodox Jew, had no idea about you know, any new religion being founded upon him, and he loved his Judaism, but he was a challenge to the religion of his day, because I think in many ways it symbolises quite accurately what's wrong with the religion of today as well. You know, it's boxed up, it's run by a hierarchy, it's controlling, it can sound rather judgmental, has a punitive view of God, and is obsessed by perfection and success.